How's it going, everyone? Landan with Late Model Restoration. Our non-intercooled Vortech kit has now reached its second and final stage of the install into our pristine 93 silver hatchback. Now, for some reason you missed out on stage 1, no worries. Click the link in the video description to get that one underneath your belt and to see what I've already accomplished leading into stage 2. I am going to begin stage 2 by mounting the head unit to the mounting plate and making sure it's topped off with the provided oil from Vortech. Now, this is their V3 head unit and it's internally lubricated, meaning I didn't have to drill and tap the oil pan. It's also satin black in color and it's going to look absolutely killer in the engine bay of our silver hatchback. After that, I'm going to throw on the tensioner and route the supercharger drive belt. Then it's over to the air inlet system, discharge tube, and bypass valve. Once that's all tidy, I'm going to mount and hide the MSD ignition box, as well as run the boost retard and all of its electrical wires in their proper orientation. Once that's all said and done, I'm going to give a solid once-over over the entire car to double-check fittings, connections, hoses. Also going to double-check timing and make sure the gas tank's topped off with 93 octane fuel. Then it's back on our dyno dyno to see how much power this thing's going to make. So without further ado, let's get started. Since this V3 head unit features self-contained oil, all I had to do was position it into the car and use the provided hardware to secure it into place. I did have to grind a little material off the smog pump pivot boss in order to clear the supercharger. Of course, be sure and position the oil drain line out of the way. Install the supercharger belt idler assembly onto the supercharger using the provided hardware. Reinstall the water pump pulley and loosely tighten the hardware. Reroute the factory serpentine drive belt. Position the supercharger drive belt over the crank pulley. Provide tension to the assembly and then tighten it down. Place the plastic air filter cover against the inner fender just inside the passenger side headlight. Use the 2 holes as a template and then use a center punch to mark them. Remove the cover and drill those 2 holes with a 3/32 drill bit. Do not install the cover at this time. Insert the mass airflow meter into the filter cover. Place the provided air filter and clamp over the meter and then tighten the clamp. Install the assembly back into the inner fender and secure the cover with the provided sheet metal screws. The supplied MSD ignition and boost controller can be mounted wherever you like. Because the engine was already pretty full, I chose to mount it underneath the fender apron on the passenger side. The wheel and splash shield were removed to gain access. I used the provided hardware from MSD to mount the controller. I then ran the boost retard knob through the passenger side firewall grommet and plugged it into the controller. The knob was mounted on the driver's side, just to the right of the gas pedal and underneath the dash. I installed the provided vacuum tee fitting in line with the vacuum hose that was installed previously for the FMU. All of the wires were positioned so that they would pass along the front of the radiator and toward the ignition coil and battery. I did extend the wires and plug them into their intended location per the Vortech instruction manual. I then made sure all of the wires were wrapped in convoluted tubing. After that, the discharge tube and bypass valve assembly was installed along with the supercharger intake piping. I did have to install another T-fitting into the FMU vacuum line in order to connect the bypass valve. Cap the open port on the throttle body with the provided vacuum cap. Use the provided 3/8 rubber hose and inline filter to route the blow-by to the barb fitting on the air filter cover. Once all of the supercharger items have been installed, reinstall all of the factory components. Check the oil in the supercharger and refill the radiator with fresh coolant. Give everything a good solid once-over to make sure everything is hooked up and installed correctly. Then, you're all finished. All right, guys, that's going to conclude part 2 and wrap up my install on the Vortech V3 supercharger into our pristine 93 hatchback. Now, I begin part 2 by picking up from part 1, which I mounted the supercharger to the mounting plate with the provided hardware. I then installed its tensioner assembly and the drive belt. After that, I installed the air box, air filter, and the factory mass air meter. Then I took the wheel off, I removed the splash shield so I could properly mount and hide the included MSD ignition box. Now, the reason why I chose this location is because the engine bay is already kind of full, and going with this spot, keep the box out of sight and out of mind. If you go this route, you will have to extend the wires going to the driver's side of the car to plug them into the coil and the positive and negative terminal on the battery. After that, I finished off the air inlet system, double checked my work over the entire car, and I backed the timing down to 10 degrees. Now, as far as the results and the dyno go, I'm gonna leave you guys leaning on the edge just a little bit longer. So to see those results, be sure and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And for all things Fox Mustang, keep it right here with the Real Fox Enthusiast, LMR.com.